Well, good morning. Welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement Network. I'm Jeff Snyder. This is BRN Sunday for Sunday, June 5th, 2022. We've got another great show for you this week as members of the media, academia, and financial services are standing by to analyze all the news and events for the week. So sit back, relax, enjoy this episode of BRN Sunday. We're going to kick off the show with a look at what's happening in the stock market. There's a lot going on these days, a lot of volatility, inflation, just how the market is dealing with it. Joining us on the line, Oliver Rennick is the lead anchor for the TD Ameritrade Network. You can find him Morning Trade Live and Markets on the Close on the network. Oliver, thanks so much for joining us on the program this morning.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Jeff.
Absolutely. Okay, let's, as I let in inflation, volatility in the market. Americans are concerned, don't even know which way to turn. You follow the markets each and every day, even on the weekends. I know you're good. You're a reader of op-eds and the Wall Street Journal on a regular basis. What's your analysis of what's occurred this week?
Well, it really started with the president's letter in Wall Street Journal about inflation in the economy. President Biden spoke very directly, it seemed, was my interpretation, to investors about what their priorities are in his White House and at the Federal Reserve. And it was pretty clear. Their number one priority is to fight inflation. They're going to do it at just about any cost, whether it may come at a cost to the stock market, the economy to some extent. Slowing it down through rate hikes and culling demand is really the only option that they have right now, other than just hoping that something eases supply chain constraints or there is a miraculous closure to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which has constrained the supply of agricultural commodities. So there's no strategy other than rate hikes and hope. And so rate hikes are the way to go. And this really put that front and center on investors' minds because the last 2 weeks of the market coming into this week had been fairly strong. We got a decent bounce in the last week of May. And some of that came as the economic data softened because we actually saw the worst economic beat rates in 8 months going into this week. Our economic surprise index was the lowest since the fall of last year, meaning that our data was missing expectations. And part of the narrative that was building around that was that investors thought the Fed might temper some of their language and perhaps hint towards a slowdown in the late summer for their rate hike plan. My view, and I believe what the market told us this week, is that that is not going to happen. There's very limited logic for that. Employment situation that we saw on Friday remains quite robust. We beat the expectations for jobs, and the market went down. That is the regime we're in. And so when the president writes in the Wall Street Journal that the regime, the economic regime of basically the last decade of low growth and low inflation is not going to be the new regime going forward, that last regime for a decade was the most bullish for stocks, arguably in history. So the natural conclusion then is that this is probably going to be a negative period for stocks. As long as we see the stocks are responding negatively to solid employment data like we got on Friday and path forward for tightening policy, there is very little reason to believe they're going to have the trend reverse higher in stocks or that the Fed chair is going to slow down. These things are very closely linked. And even though we had a couple moments of strength around earnings like Salesforce and Chewy, a pandemic winner that's been getting now, there were some pockets of strength and a good rally on Thursday, but it's very hard to keep that upside going when it's so clear that everybody who's in charge of the economy is ready to slow it down at the cost of beating inflation.
Oliver,
with the goal to beat inflation.
Understood. Thank you for the clarification. I know we saw people like Jamie Dimon come out. Actually, there was a funny picture in the New York Post. I happened to flip by there, and he was in like rain gear, and it looked like he said that there's a upcoming economic or financial hurricane that we could be seeing. I mean, do you put, I'm not a person who puts a lot of stock in what one person says or even what multiple people say, but is that the consensus that storm clouds are here, they're ahead, and we could see some whipsaw events in the continue in the market for the foreseeable future.
Absolutely. It's interesting to hear Diamond because he recently waxed fairly positively on the market in the
Yeah.
economy. But I just believe that that is the easiest conclusion right now. Um, whether or not it's a hurricane or a tornado, I'm not really sure what he means by that, illustration, but
Yeah.
it's not welcome. And the one thing that I think is really important here is that things that are causing volatility and disruption in markets have been quite foreseeable.
Yeah.
Not by the consensus, obviously, but there was a very loud cohort of analysts, including myself, over the last year. Now, some people have been calling for a problematic inflation for many years, and they've been wrong on that. But there were some of us who were able to pretty easily connect the dots, and it really is not that hard. And the fact that we have been able to see the market punish people for not getting out of the way of this very slow-moving train of inflation, it was very obvious to me and some others that the reopening of the economy would almost certainly bring the end of the bull rally in stocks from the COVID era, a sustainable elevated inflation due to activity coming back into the regular economy, and that's what we see, services economy picking up. And so when Jamie Dimon says he sees a hurricane, that is kind of one of these moments where a lot of people, their inclination is to say, well, if people are all warning about something, how bad could it be? Well, there's been plenty of people warning for a year and a half that this was going to happen once we beat COVID, and now it's happening, and a lot of people are in pain. Traders, investors that did not switch into the downtrend are getting hurt really badly. People who did not assess the impact of rising rates on high growth businesses that have been stuck in funds like the ARK fund for over a year now are down 60 to 70%. People who overspent their savings now are seeing their savings rate decline as they did not predict and assess and prepare for the destructive forces of inflation. So even though it seems we are getting some of this commentary from Diamond, Elon Musk, and others, it should not be ignored. There's a tendency I hear a lot of times where people go, oh, everybody's, big people are calling for something, then it can't be that bad because we'll prepare for it. That has not been the case the last year. So I would definitely listen and appreciate what some of these people are warning about.
Last question. How does the U.S. compare with other global markets? I mean, is this consistent with forgetting Russia, forgetting Ukraine for a second? But what about China? What about Latin America? I mean, are they feeling the same pain, the same volatility, or worse?
Well, China is a very different type of struggle. But in Europe, there is a similar type of trajectory taking shape right now where they struggled for COVID longer than us. Omicron hit England and Europe harder than it did here. Mm-hmm. And because of that, they are behind us. And also the European Central Bank generally, just because of the challenge of trying to dictate policy across a large block of countries, is always slower moving and more easy. But they too now are preparing for an interest rate hike path that will probably be fairly sustainable as their economy also deals with inflation. Now they're behind the Fed, but they will be joining in the same direction, and that generally adds to the bear case for stocks because there is a long-running macro investing theme called the TINA trade that is now formally ending probably for a very long time and permanently. There is no alternative trade where yields remain so low that investors were basically forced to buy risk assets. But now as yields rise, there are more options for income. It's important to remember that even though yields are going up, bond prices are going down. That's painful for many people. There are forced buyers of bonds like pension funds that are happy to see some of these interest rates go up and being able to lock in higher interest rates. So the speculation in markets, risk markets, will continue to decline the more central banks follow the Fed. But China is still pretty far ways behind because they literally were still struggling with COVID up until, as we speak, with shutdowns. So they've got a little bit of a catch-up game to play.
Well, I've got my rain gear, or as they say in the boating industry, my foul weather gear is on, Oliver. You know, obviously some gray skies ahead. Not good. I know a lot of people, just regular Main Street America, feeling a lot of pain, and doesn't look like there's any help on the way just yet. I guess we'll have to look and see what happens. Oliver Rennick, always a pleasure chatting with you. Thanks for stopping by and enjoy the rest
Sure thing.
of your weekend, my friend.
All right. Thanks, Jeff.
Welcome back. Now time to talk about what's happening on Capitol Hill, and you know them as the Legal Eagles. You also know them. Well, today he's flying solo, but you know him as David Levine, one half of the Legal Eagles, but he's also a principal with Groom Law Group, an employee benefits law firm based in Washington, D.C. David, thanks so much for stopping by this morning.
Jeff, as always, thanks for having me. You know, I'm flying solo, so we can have some fun today.
We can. Well, it's not to say Kevin's a stick in the mud, but obviously when you have two people in the program, and they're different areas, sometimes different parts of the country, it can be very, very challenging to kind of orchestrate. So we appreciate having you on. And, you know, I think I want to make this a more of an open, rather than planning out our segment. I know you wanted to kind of I wanted to ask you what's on your mind this week, you and Kevin, as you're traversing the retirement trapeze.
Sure, as we're traversing the retirement metaverse today, don't worry, we're not going to have a whole series of movies on this. There's a couple things. You know, let's talk a little bit about regulation. Because regulation this week, we started to see coming out a whole bunch of the comments on two things. One's a little bit more wonky, but one's something that's sort of a leading edge area that we've obviously talked about a lot. The first is the wonky side is prohibited transaction individual exemption procedures. The deadline to comment on the Department of Labor's proposed revision was this week. And as expected, there were a number of comments put in. There's a real sort of push and pull here. The Department of Labor has proposed sort of updating its process, as we talked about a little while ago. And there's things such as what independent fiduciaries can and cannot say. Can they market that they do this work? And there was some pushback. Admittedly, we submitted comments. I know a lot of groups did at this point. So I think that one of the things we're going to be watching for to take away from these comments is the DOL going to modify its procedures, hopefully to increase the number of potential exemptions we get? I don't think anybody's trying to abuse the system, but I think it's more sort of that in this world of consolidation and complexity that we live in, sometimes when a plan sponsor or a service provider, it could be both, it's a lot of the time it's a plan sponsor, is trying to do something with their plan where technically it might violate some of the arcane rules that make up the law we love, ERISA, they need to go get an exemption or ask for an exemption from the Department of Labor. The number of those exemptions has become fewer and farther between, dramatically so over the last 20 years. And I think there's a real question is this program going to be something that really keeps going, even though it's in ERISA, the statute, or has it become so challenging that it's effectively on its way to extinction? Both of those are rather draconian or sort of extreme statements. But I think the takeaway is we have to see how the department responds. Hopefully the department, and respectfully, it was great that they asked for comments and extended the comment period. I think hopefully we reach a middle ground where we can make things work for participants, beneficiaries, and everybody involved in a good way, but maybe open up the exemption process a little bit more. That's my bias, but that's one. Mm-hmm. Number two.
David, real quick before
number two. Yeah.
Oh, yes. Just real quick. These comments, are they like Twitter 256 characters like they're on Twitter, or are these voluminous comments like maybe 5, 10, 15, 20 page comment letters? How does this typically get wrapped up?
The answer is the comments. You could submit a comment through regulations.gov and just type like one sentence and submit it. But the typical comments from like industry players and such are usually many page comments. Yes. Okay. But they do vary. The second one is that I'll turn to, because that's rather arcane, and I admit it. Maybe I shouldn't have started with that. The second one that I'll turn to is the multiple employer plan and the pooled employer plan world. You know, Jeff, Kevin and I have talked a lot about that over the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
And the IRS re-engaged earlier this year with proposals about how do you apply sort of the unified plan rule, the idea it's one plan, are there exceptions to it? How do you deal with the so-called one bad apple when there's someone in a plan where there's an employer that may not timely remit contributions or makes a mistake that impacts the plan as a whole? And the IRS came out with new proposed guidance that picks up off of its guidance several years ago that in some ways I think was a little bit easier to work with. But even so, there were a lot of comments back asking for further simplification. I completely understand the IRS is trying to make sure plans, participants, and everybody is protected. So it'll be interesting to see what those comments say. But there was definitely a push for give us more flexibility. Let each employer almost have more operation on their own, whether it is just making a mistake or even vesting or other items. So we'll have to see what the IRS does, but this could make a big impact on PEPs because depending where this guidance goes, it could impact, well, how are PEPs structured? Because there's discussion in the proposed regulation about, well, what does a pooled plan provider, the person or entity really at the center of a PEP have to do? What can they delegate? There's a little bit of discussion of that in this regulation, and it could really impact the marketplace. Where it lands, we'll see. It's just like the Department of Labor is still, and we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, still evaluating how to the reporting requirements work for so-called groups of plans, or sometimes called PEP Light or whatever you want to call it, that were also authorized by the Secure Act.
Yeah,
the TLD.
Go
Sorry,
ahead.
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. No, go ahead. I was going to make a joke.
Oh, no, please. The TLDR, or too long don't read, answer on this is these rules could dramatically impact whether PEPs and even GOPS, is the other item I referred to, are more viable and take off more, or maybe just stay as a corner of the industry but don't expand that much. So we have to wait and see.
David, last question for this segment before you fly away. We talked last week about some pending legislation. Since you bring up PEPs, MEPs, that whole area and comments, could there be comments around CITs? Because I think that was an impediment, if I recall our conversation last week correctly, that could be an impediment to, not-for-profit plan sponsors joining a PEP or another, type of plan.
Absolutely, Jeff. And I think, the Rise and Shine bill, proposal doesn't have it in there, but we're still waiting to see what comes out of Senate Finance in the end. Obviously, just to recap for the listeners, when the Secure 2.0 passed out of the House, right towards the end, the 403B and CIT language was removed. There were some jurisdictional and other discussions there. From you listen to different people, and we've talked to folks. It seems like that we're on track to have it added back in a version that comes out of the Senate. But until it ain't over till it's over, as Yogi Berra used to say. So I think at this point, I think that hopefully it's looking good, but you don't count on anything until it's actually in the legislation.
Yeah, I like that you brought in Yogi Berra. There may be some listeners on this program who may not know Yogi Berra, a little on the younger end. David, we're going to leave it there. Please give our best to your colleague Kevin Walsh, and we wish you and your family a great weekend. Look forward to having you back on the program again next week.
Thank you so much, Jeff, and thank you, listeners.
Welcome back. We're going to talk about technology and consumer products. A lot more streaming, you name it. We're going to talk about it in this segment. Joining me on the line, he's the managing editor for TheStreet.com. We're talking about Daniel Klein. Dan, welcome back to the program. Great to talk to you this morning.
Good morning, Jeff. It's a difficult morning. All of the sports, I have not had a lot of sleep. It's Celtics win last night, Rangers win the other night. It has been a tough time to get to bed.
Well, hopefully this weekend you get a little bit of rest, relaxation, and recuperation. All right, Dan, I want to ask you before we kind of jump into some evolution in various industries and what's happening in the return to work or remote work, etc. I want to get your first blush, first response, first thoughts on Kenobi, which is the new Disney Plus series. It's a mini-series focusing on the great Obi-Wan or Ben Kenobi. What were your first take on that?
Yeah, good job when you're trying to hide, changing your name slightly. That's
right. I mean, there are apparently a few. I won't bring anything up, but there may be multiple Kenobis out in the world. So, hey, there's a Ben Kenobi now. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, no, so I liked how they opened it with the recap of the prequels. I didn't expect that, and it really made it understandable if you're not a fan. That being said, I am a fan. I've seen every movie. I've read every book. I am a diehard Star Wars fan, and I've only seen the first episode. And I'll say I'm intrigued, but I'm not there yet. I'm not entirely sure where it's going, what the plot's going to be. That said, you've got the Darth Vader teases, you've got the Inquisitors, which previously had only been sort of in the cartoons. I'm trying not to spoil it too much for people, but I do think it was visually stunning and kind of like all of the Marvel and Disney shows on Disney Plus. It started a little slowly, but it was just enough to make me think, oh, this is probably going to be really, really good.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to spoil it. I think if we're just talking about the first episode, story starts off a little slow in my opinion. But I did like the visuals, and it's interesting. I don't know how much older is Ewan McGregor? What the last movie was 2006, is that correct? So he's what, 16 years older?
I don't know the numbers, but he looked good.
Yeah, he did look good.
But also he does look a little older, and it's important that he does because he didn't play the role in the original movies, and Alec Guinness, who did, looked really old, and they always explain that as well. He lived in the desert; it was very hard on him, and seeing sort of like that Obi-Wan's doing like difficult manual labor for a decade, maybe it does sort of connect the dots. One of the challenges Star Wars has always had is, when George Lucas wrote Star Wars, he didn't have this master plan for this whole universe. So they've had to go back and correct some things that maybe didn't make that much sense. And these TV shows have done some of that. And it looks like here they're going to do that one maybe a little more skillfully than they've done some of the other things.
Yeah. What do they call that, Dan? Retconning? Is that what that's called?
That is what they call it. I wasn't going to use it because I wasn't sure how common it was.
And Dan, sorry, audience, I'm very interested in Dan. I love Star Wars too, so I'm interested in Dan's feedback. But Dan, have you ever been to a Star Wars convention or one of the Comic Cons where they have the actors from Star Wars on there?
So I've been to like regional Comic Cons where you get like the people who played the Jedi who get killed in the Episode 3 Jedi montage. I've never been to one where like Chewbacca shows up or any of the real cast members.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. For me, that level of fandom, like I like the story. I don't necessarily need to shake hands with R2-D2, which is a weird person to pick example of shaking hands with.
That is on.
But I appreciate it. I'm glad people do it. I certainly love Star Wars Land at Disney's Hollywood Studios, which is just an incredible immersive experience. But I'm not so sure I need Lando Calrissian's autograph.
Okay, well,
and apologies to Billy D. Williams. I know who plays Lando.
And Donald Glover, right? No, what's the name of the young man?
Yeah, Donald Glover is in negotiations about maybe doing a young Lando spin-off series.
Wow. Okay. All right, Dan, let's turn our attention to Walmart. They just unveiled plans for a highly automated, speedier set of fulfillment centers in an effort to keep ahead or keep pace with our friends. Not really our friends, but their friends at Amazon.
Yeah, I think keep pace is probably the way to go. Amazon doesn't talk about it a ton, but they have highly automated, lots of robots. We hear about all the workers and the difficulties at Amazon's facilities, but they've automated a lot of the heavy lifting. And the reality is this is the way it's going to go. It doesn't make sense to have people sorting boxes and moving things. And FedEx has done some of this with robot arms. And right now, it's difficult to hire workers. Workers complain. Workers unionize. Workers want to go to the bathroom and eat lunch. Robots generally don't do that. Really, until they rise up and kill us all, robots are great.
Yeah. Sometimes they do need a oil bath like they did on Tatooine in Episode 4, A New Hope, right? You remember C-3PO getting...
Everyone loves a good oil bath. And obviously, it's kind of like automating fast food. Could McDonald's put in a system that makes all its hamburgers? Absolutely. But you have to get franchises to spend the hundreds of thousands of dollars that will cost. So the reality is you don't get automation until it makes sense on a savings basis, where it's like, all right, I can't find the workers. I need to get this work done. That's one reason to automate. Another reason is, well, I'm paying these workers $18 an hour, and I'll recoup the cost of that in 7 months if I automate or whatever it is. But you're going to see this with grocery picking at really sooner rather than later, because you have hundreds of thousands of people, literally hundreds of thousands of people between Instacart and Walmart that are physically picking groceries, and that makes no sense. What you're going to see humans do is customer service, is supervising, is doing the things that it makes sense for a human to do. And everyone talks about job loss because of this, but the reality is it just creates new and different jobs. We've been modernizing and redoing how we build things for hundreds of years, and it has not led to widespread there's no work. We're not turning into a world where robots do all the work and we all sit on lounge chairs and our Roombas bring us a martini. Like it's simply not happening that way.
My Roomba does not bring a martini. It does, however, scare our cats. Dan, let's talk about the back to office and this one popped up. This debate kind of popped back up again recently because Elon Musk wanted all of Tesla employees back in the office. So they had, I guess, quote unquote, an edict to get employees back in. And this has really, again, reinvigorated that debate on whether or not remote work can work. I understand from a manufacturing point of view, if you are on the line creating a Tesla, Dan, even the parts that are automated, you kind of have to be on the line. But what does this mean regarding the remote work or hybrid or back to office? I mean, is this ever really going to be a concluded debate and we'll have a definitive answer on what the right model is? I would say probably not, right?
Yeah, we won't, and it's complicated because here's the reality. Elon Musk took if you're working at home, you're not really working, which is nonsense. There's been numerous studies that show that people at work home actually put more hours in, largely because they don't have to commute and they want to appear to be working. So they actually get more work done. But on the other hand, I agree with the argument by Reed Hastings, Netflix CEO, because they're a creative company and creativity remotely is more difficult. There's a reason they have a writer's room, not 8 writers working separately. So it's going to be complicated because it's what Tesla should be saying is if you're in accounting, if you're in HR, if you're in all these other different areas, you probably can work at home. But if you're in product design, maybe you need to come into the office a few days a week. I also thought it was really telling that Elon Musk said you must be in the office a minimum of 40 hours a week and made it clear that he expected you to work way more than 40 hours a week, but hey, only be in the office for 40. And I think we've learned Elon Musk is a jerk and he says things to get attention. He's not doing this about the debate of what's right or what isn't. He's clinging to this old idea that people who work at home are somehow lazy. And Jeff, you and I both work at home. I know I'm incredibly more efficient. I miss the human aspects of it. I wish we had an office or someplace I could go to occasionally and be around people. I wish I could spend, more time with my team in person. But do I think, we need to be in an office? No. This is going to be a debate because basically, younger folks and people who are not used to being in an office recognize how kind of dumb the construct is for most jobs. But I also think most companies are going to recognize that offices are expensive and not having one, even if you'd prefer to have one, probably makes a lot of sense.
Dan, I mean, this isn't just a tech company issue either, right? I mean, you talk about Wall Street, you talk about just mainstream businesses. Obviously you do need in some cases people working in restaurants, right? Unless they're automated, like we discussed in the second part of this segment. But really, this is something that is not just a tech-focused discussion. Elon Musk and Tesla is a tech-type company, but this is going on across the board.
Yeah, I think the challenge is, as a company, you honestly have to figure out which jobs require collaboration that would benefit from being in person. Look, I used to fly to the Motley Fool office, once a month, and I got a lot of benefit out of that. Now, with all my former coworkers, being remote and the office, when it reopened, sort of being more like a co-work than a traditional office, there wouldn't be a lot of benefit for me to be there, because the people I'd want to meet with, even just the people I didn't know that I might walk by and then end up having a coffee with, and it would be good for me to meet them. That type of interaction isn't going to happen. I do think it's going to make certain things more difficult. How do you evaluate who should be promoted? How do you evaluate, individual work? There are challenges, but there's also benefits. Look, if you get a delivery, yesterday I got a delivery that was perishable. Pretty great that I was home rather than coming home at 6:30 at night and you see your delivery sitting in the sun all day. There, people are more present for their families. There's a lot of positives, but I do think, Jeff, as people who have worked remotely, I miss bumping into a coworker at the coffee station. I miss getting to go to lunch with someone I work with, just because I haven't seen them in a while. It's a complicated question, but we can't answer that question with the sort of like age-old trope of, well, if you work at home, you're lazy, because we know that's not true.
Yeah, I would say it's a bit isolating working remotely, even though I do go downstairs or try to walk around a little bit. But I guess this is a debate that we're not going to answer, but it's good to kind of keep talking about it. And I think we will continue to talk about it for weeks, months, years, perhaps to come. Dan Klein, always a pleasure chatting with you. Thanks for dropping by. I hope you get that rest, and maybe you'll catch up on the two other Kenobi episodes this weekend. Have a great rest of the weekend, my friend.
I'll talk to you soon, Jeff. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Well, that wraps up this episode of BRN Sunday. Have a topic of interest or somebody you think we should talk to? Drop us a line, and don't forget, for all the latest curated news in lifestyle, wellness, finance, tech, so much more, all in one place, check out today's edition of our daily newsletter, The Morning Pulse. Want to search our archives, check out our latest content, we'll visit our website at www.broadcastretirementnetwork.com and our streaming partners. We're back again tomorrow for another edition of BRN AM. We'll have a very special guest. Until then, I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.